Stephen Platinum here. I saw the video by Shane Marx and Miss Rachael, and a couple of things I noticed. One was how cold it is in Atlanta. You guys are wearing parkas. You guys are out there in the wind and the cold, and it got me to thinking about how I'm not in those conditions. And this is not me bragging, but it's just a fact. Here in Florida, it's warm, and it got me thinking about the differences between Shane Marx, Rachael, and myself. Ever since I've gotten here, and especially now that I know I'm going to be there on February 2nd to wrestle, I've been working out like a madman, but it's not the same thing as what Shane Marx has been doing. He's been in wrestling rings, wrestling for everybody and anybody who's worth anything in the state of Georgia. And he's winning titles where he goes. He's wrestling the best wrestlers where he goes. And I don't match up to that. It doesn't matter how much I swim, how many weights I lift, the running that I do. And I do all of those things every day, but it's not the same, and I know that. As for Rachael, I know that she's tough, but I'm famously tough. Shane Marx is at an age now where when I wrestled, I was getting beat by everybody. But I was getting beat by everybody 5 to 7 times a week, and really out there on the road and really taking those beatings, and I just kept coming back. It's the trait that I'm most proud of, is when you have 1,000 matches or more and you never had a major injury, but you really did the damn thing. It's pretty remarkable in my eyes. Now, I got Mason as a partner, and Mason is as tough as they come. So I have a pretty good feeling about February 2nd. But before I talk about that more, I want to talk about something else happening February 2nd. And that's that other people are running wrestling shows. And that's okay. It's the wrestling business, and people can run any kind of show they want to, anywhere they want to. It's certainly not the old NWA territory days. But there's a show in Covington which is right next to Porterdale. And I know Smart Money says you shouldn't talk about somebody else's show, but I feel the need to talk about this one because I think it illustrates a pretty good point. That show is run, I'm not sure officially, but I think like Lee Brock and Chris Nelms definitely have a hand in running that show. And Steve and Terry Lawler, who are going to be at the PCW show on February 2nd, at my behest, are also wrestling on that show. Now, I had heard things about the fact that Lee Brock and Chris Nelms were the kind of guys who ripped down posters. Certainly people have posted about that before. They deny it, and they say that they wouldn't do that, and that if anything it was friends of theirs, whatever. I sent them a message saying, basically, leave the posters alone, leave ours alone. And they said they wouldn't touch them and all that kind of thing. And they said, we could work together. We could make sure that we run on different weeks as PCW, and we can promote your show and you can promote our show. And Terry Lawler, who was sort of in on all of this, said that he thought that was a great idea. I'm going to be an asshole here. It's not. And here's why. When I got to Georgia, there was no respect given to me, and there shouldn't have been. I was the new kid, and I was coming from nowhere, and I didn't have a name, and I was opening up a wrestling school. Respectfully, I got a hold of everybody I could and told them I was opening up and I wouldn't take their students and that kind of thing. It was up to me to show respect. to Georgia because I was coming into that place. When PCW started running in earnest in 2010, meaning we had existed before that, but in 2010 we started running shows like crazy, once a week at Academy Theater, shows at the Jungle on Tuesdays, and then Masquerade like once a month, and we've run a lot of shows, and guys like Bill Barron's, Jimmy Rave, Murder One, sort of these guys who are big figures in Georgia wrestling, did not have respect for me. And I knew it, I would hear about it, or I would see results of it. And frankly, I didn't complain about it publicly because I did not warrant their respect. They were entitled to their opinion about what they thought the show was, what I was as a booker, the talent that I had trained and used. They had their rights to that opinion. And again, they were the ones who had paid their dues in Georgia. They were the ones who had done the damn thing. And it was up to me to run a good show long enough that I could get their respect. And when I felt that I had reached a place and PCW had reached a place of prominence, I went to those guys and I mended those fences. And to their credit, we were cool. Jimmy wrestled for PCW shows at Academy Theater before those shows stopped. Murder One did as well, of their own volition. And Bill Barons and I, whatever problems there were, we mended them. But I had to arrive at that place where I could be considered a peer, so that could take place. Why am I bringing this up? In no way, shape, or form is the show that is taking place in Covington on February 2nd a peer to PCW. It simply is not. And the people who are putting on that show are not peers to me. If that sounds arrogant, that is too bad because it is the truth. When they say, we could use some of your guys, you can use some of ours. Wrestling logic, okay? In the territory days, groups did not work together. And the reason they did not work together was because they were competition for each other. Now, in this day and age, things are different. There were guys from Anarchy who would wrestle for PCW, or Rampage that would wrestle for PCW. But that was a slow process. I would get a guy here and there, and then I would book them phenomenally, and then the gospel spread. Guys like Dany Only and Chip Day, who I brought in the early days, ended up getting us other people because they said, Steve knows what he's doing, and I know you've heard bad stuff, blah, blah, blah. I earned that. I didn't just step and demand it. So while I might come across as a jerk, I gotta say, when Lee Brock and Chris Nelm say something like, we should work together, my answer is no. Not because I'm fierce and angry about it, but because, frankly, they haven't earned it. It took years for PCW to run to get to the point where I was even mentioned as a guy who might be a good booker. And PCW wasn't a joke. And after everything that all the men and women who have worked on that show did, after all the work that we've put in, and establishing ourselves in Porterdale and bringing wrestling back to that area for the first time in decades, and doing it in a big way, and doing it well, and doing it with people like Tim Savage, who have that property in Porterdale, and working with that town, for Chris Nelms and Lee Brock and those guys to just roll into that space in Covington, run on the same night as us when we've been doing that for almost a year, first and third Saturdays, and then go, well, we could work together. It's abhorrent and it's disrespectful, period. If wrestling groups want to work together, what they need to do is get on equal footing. I adjusted the time of our show on February 16th to accommodate Nightmare to Remember 3 because I have respect for Ted Allen, I have respect for Terry Lawler and the other guys like Todd who put on that show. I have respect for them. and they have shown respect to me. Period. When guys from Anarchy would work our shows, that came about as a result of respect, mutual respect that we acquired for one another, not demanded, not expected, not begged for. It's a process, and one of the problems with wrestling is people, especially young bookers and promoters and guys that don't know what they're doing, is they expect things to just happen. Guys, and this goes to a lot of people. This goes to UIW. You have to earn, earn it. You have to earn the names. You have to be able to earn a position where you can pick up a phone and get somebody to talk to you who's a better piece of talent. You have to earn those things. They don't just happen because you want them to. And they don't just happen because it's a polite business. It's not. Wrestling has always been on the fringe, and it always will be. And that's why it's amazing, and that's why it's fantastic. And on February 2nd, people can say, who drew better than who, blah, blah, blah. That is what it is. I am convinced we will be packed at Porterdale. But I can tell you one thing for sure. PCW is going to be the better show. And you know what? In my world, that still fucking matters. PCW had to get better. And Porterdale is a great spot. And I can't wait to be back. And like I said, I'm moving heaven and earth to be there. And thinking about Porterdale got me thinking about Dany Only. Dany Only is a guy who, when Strychnine was coming on in APW in a big bad way, that kind of left Dany as the odd man out. And he came into PCW and took it by storm. And everything he's gotten, he deserves. And while Dany and I may not agree about everything, one thing we can agree on is we want wrestling to be better. We want it to be better. And in Porterdale, it just didn't come together for Dany. He lost the loser leave PCW match to Jagged Edge in Porterdale. He wasn't there for Sacred Ground 3. And I know that's something that hurts him deeply. He couldn't be there as a wrestler as per the stipulation, but he wasn't there. And on the night that was so spectacular, and again, by the way, for promotions that are dying for respect, as soon as you can pull off a Sacred Ground 3, talk to me. As soon as you can pull off a shows like Wildside has done and Anarchy has done, like at the end of the Palmer era, or when Wildside went out, and they put on shows that were just legendary. When you pull off the legendary show, not just amongst the boys who were there that go, no, it was great. I'm talking about shows that people talk about for months and years afterwards. That's part of what I'm talking about. And Dany, who had made a big name for himself at Sacred Ground 2 when he wrestled Vordell Walker, wasn't there at 3. And that's tragic. I chatted with Dany recently, and there's something that I think I need to bring February 2nd. And what that is I asked Dany if it would be cool if I used the lariat. Now, Dany had a hellified lariat. I mean, it put a lot of guys down for the count, including Davey Richards. And I think I've got a pretty good lariat myself. And I'm going to lay this lariat on Miss Rachael. I'm going to bust that bitch up. And I think I'm going to put that on Shane Marx as well. Scheming in my head, planning. Why would I tell anybody in advance what I'm going to do? Because I'm going to tell Rachael and Shane Marx everything that I plan on doing. Because what's going to happen is they're not as strong mentally as I am. When all of these things start manifesting, They will begin to unravel before your very eyes. It's not enough for me and Mason to win. It's not enough for us to get those titles stripped from Shane Marx. I need people to see Rachael and Shane Marx implode before their very eyes. That is the only penance acceptable for the crimes they have committed. And I want Jeff G there to watch it happen. February 2nd. As a tribute to Dany, who is working in Afghanistan and won't be around until 2014, I'm going to be wearing this. That's his t-shirt. I'm going to be wearing that underneath this green jacket. Get better or get out. He's right. And for the promotions in Georgia that cause undue stress, for the promotions in Georgia that are so busy talking about how great they are instead of being great, February 2nd, PCW, there's going to be a lot of hype rolling into that show. We are going to deliver on that hype. Mason and I are going to deliver a Roman fucking triumph. February 2nd.